Good evening and welcome to the Newshour Agenda. I'm Madhavdas G. Viewers, the preliminary AAIB report has stopped short of mentioning who's responsible for the crash, but the foreign media is running away with their own theories, even going on to blame the pilot for the Air India AI-171 crash. Is the foreign media trying to malign the Indian aviation sector, and how will India respond? Viewers, ever since the release of the preliminary report of the AIB, the foreign media has launched a hit job and a smear campaign of sorts to pin the blame on the two Indian pilots who were in charge of the ill-fated Air India flight. Now, there seems to be a concerted effort by Western media to call it human error or even pilot suicide. The preliminary probe report revealed what led to the crash, but stopped short of naming who's responsible. Is the foreign media that has latched on to the paraphrased excerpt of the conversation between the two pilots just pushing a certain narrative? There's a report in the Wall Street Journal which has cited sources and now claims that there are new details blaming the senior pilot in the cockpit for the crash. It claims the black box recording of the dialogue between the flight's two pilots indicates it was the captain who turned off the switches that control fuel flowing to the plane's two engines. But Viewers Times now has also managed to access the flight logs of the ill-fated Air India plane. The flight logs mention how there were faults detected in the BPCU gateway minutes before the plane took off. This is a system that controls the electrical power routing, and it could lead to the plane switching to backup power in case of an emergency. The flight logs mention how there were several factors at play and could have also played a part in the events that followed on the AI-171 flight. So why is the foreign media jumping the gun and rushing to blame the pilots? Now, the AIB has also called out the selective and unverified reporting by sections of the international media to attempt to draw conclusions, quote unquote. It further says that such actions are highly irresponsible at a time when the probe is still underway. Further, they have urged the foreign media to refrain from speaking premature narratives and stop creating public anxiety on the basis of unfounded claims. Many questions, though, about whether this is some kind of an afterthought and whether this should not have been, in fact, looked at more seriously. Let's take this across to Arunil, who's also with us. Arunil, we also have access now, a separate report that shows that on the previous leg, there was some kind of failure that existed, and that's what's being talked about as far as the stabilizer is concerned. Take our viewers through what really this means, because that means even before it touched down in Ahmedabad, there were some technical issues with the aircraft.
Well, we know that this ill-fated flight, basically it had departed from Delhi. It reached Ahmedabad. It was stationed in Ahmedabad for some time, and then it took off for Gatwick in United Kingdom. Now, this flight log, Madhav, is very, very significant. My video journalist Sanjay Ranjit is showing us these crucial details as well. See the date, 12 June 2025. That is the date of the crash. Delhi to Ahmedabad. In the end also you can see stabilizer position sensor replaced. Here as well, EMCU replaced. Basically, it means that there was a technical snag, in the software as well as the electrical components of this flight. Whether it led to an command within the uncommand, beg your pardon, whether it led to an uncommand in the fuel control systems of this flight, that is what is being probed now by the AIB as well. Now, coming to foreign media as well, it was the US researchers who were part of the investigation who were very
So did this have an impact, because there are electrical faults, as you rightly mentioned, that were in fact part of the subsequent flight as well? Arunil, stay with us. There's some more breaking news coming in. There's a PIL now filed in the Madras High Court by advocate over the Air India AI-171 crash. The PIL has sought action to stop defamatory and unverified media reportage targeting pilots and aviation professionals. Dharni, what does the PIL say?
Well, this public interest litigation filed by an advocate named Praveen says that in the aftermath of Air India AI-171 crash, several media reports that are defamatory, unverified, and in nature, they are being spread by several media outlets, especially the pilot and co-pilot of the Air India AI-171 flight. Their reputation is being tarnished by a few media articles, and this is causing a lot of distress to their respective families, and this is a direct violation to their right right to privacy and right to dignity. And the prayer here is that the Madras High Court should provide a direction to the Ministry of Civil Aviation, the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, and also the DGCA to establish institutional safeguards aimed at preventing such misreporting. That is the
all right. Arunil and Dharni, thanks so much for joining us with those quick updates. Let's open this up to our guests. I believe we have that petitioner with us. M. Praveen is with us. Also joining us is Anurag Mittal, who's a captain of Czech Airmen and a trainer. We have Air Marshal Dr. Sanjeev Kapoor, Dr. Anand Rathnathan. Alistair Rosenshine is a former Boeing pilot and an aviation consultant. We have Bernard Lavelle, principal consultant at BL Aviation Consulting. Let me start with you, Mr. Praveen. What has prompted you to file this petition in the Madras High Court?
Sir, first consider myself a human from witnessing an incident. I felt that even a pilot is, after all, a human being. Hearing people speak badly about and deeply hurt me more and more. In India, about 700 planes per day was operating. In that, now nearly 1,500 pilots were there. But the foreign media journalists speak in the way that hurts or insult them is very concerning, sir. That even the family members of these pilots are also greatly worried, and their children are affected when their schoolmates as well as class ask their friends also. It's a very baselessly was going in
Mr.
my
Praveen, when is the hearing into
and,
this matter? Have you sought an urgent hearing by the High Court?
Yes. That makes me to put the public interest litigation, sir. That's the main thing, sir.
And how do you propose that the High Court, which has jurisdiction in Tamil Nadu, will actually have an impact on foreign reportage? Because there's no jurisdiction, some will argue.
Yes, there is no jurisdiction when the by internet, but in some of the social medias in India also, some of them were speaking very wrongly about our pilots and other things. That
All
also
right.
that makes me very
All right.
sad.
No, certainly. As a citizen, your angst is understandable. But the point is, what can the courts also do in this matter, given that many of these articles are coming in from jurisdictions which are way beyond the jurisdiction of the High Court there in Madras. But stay with us, Mr. Praveen. Let me bring in Air Marshal Dr. Sanjeev Kapoor. Dr. Sanjeev Kapoor, today is Thursday.
Yes.
We all know how late night on Friday, about 5 nights ago, the AAIB released the report. Why did that report come in the dead of the night? I have absolutely no idea. Why is there no statement from the AIB or a briefing by the Ministry of Civil Aviation or the DGCA? Again, no idea. But when there is wild speculation happening, now the AIB releases a statement saying that foreign media should refrain. You know, there are all sorts of sensitivities as far as pilots are concerned. And this is after media reports, pilot associations come out and express the outrage. What's going on?
Good evening to you and the fellow panelists. I covered on some of the channels that it was exactly as per the laid down ICO regulations that on the 30th day at 3 a.m. in the night, this report was released. It does not have anybody's signature. This report is not signed by anybody. This report has terms and things which are not commonly used in Indian aviation. That is point number one. Point number two, it has left more questions than the answers that it has given. Third, the Wall Street Journal, a day prior to this report, had come up with an article 24 hours before this report was made public to speak on the similar lines that it is the aircraft fuel systems that have malfunctioned and there could be a pilot error in there. And today morning, a Wall Street Journal tweet goes on to say that the pilot which was flying this aeroplane was mentally unstable. Now, if you see the past, be it MH370, which had Boeing 777, be it Lion Air, 737 MAX, be it Ethiopian Air 737 MAX, be it the Egypt Air 1999 Boeing 767, be it Silk Air 1997 Boeing 737, and Air India latest aircraft Boeing 787, all had the direction that the pilots were not okay. Even in MH370, if you recall, when it disappeared from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, that the pilot had a lot of family problems, the pilot had some issues, we couldn't find that aeroplane. And later for 737 MAX, we could find out
No,
It
but there
was
is
actually-
while there very well can be pilot error, the point is several times that these speculations have been wrong. Even in the case of the 737 MAX, and let me bring in some of our other panelists on this. Alistair Rosenshine, on the 737 MAX, we saw how Boeing and the NTSB were at pains to show that it was pilot error. It took a second accident for them to come out with the angle of attack sensor or whatever other technical issue it was. So why should that, or why could that not be happening in this particular case? Why should we take the Wall Street Journal's view as the final word, even before the final investigation report is out?
Well, the straight answer is we shouldn't take the view of a newspaper, of any newspaper. The report, we've been given an interim report so far. The aim of the report is not to apportion blame, but to get to the bottom of this, to find out what actually caused the accident. Now, we know in the past that there have been pilot suicides. There's no question about it. One can't argue otherwise. But to suggest that that was the case in this accident before the full report has come out would be quite wrong. And the pilots' union is quite right to defend the pilots in this way. Nonetheless, the report clearly says one of the pilots asked the other one why he had switched off the fuel pumps. And you can't get away from that factor. That is in this interim report. And that is the main reason why.
The exact phrase is, why did you shut it off? The fuel switch is not referred to. Aren't there other devices that could be shut off, sir?
In the report, it says that the fuel switch is transition from run to cut-off.
Transition.
That is clearly in this report.
Transition is interesting because transition, and I've been speaking to many pilots, is normally used in the case of the fuel valve and not the switch. Isn't that the case?
Yes, I can agree with you that it is a little bit ambiguous. The fact that they say it transitions from run to cut-off means that it is not specifically saying that somebody on the flight deck actually moved the switches. So the language has been chosen very carefully in the report, and we have no reason to interpret it in any other way.
All right, there are many, many questions, and I want to bring in Captain Anurag Mittal on this. Captain Mittal, we have been discussing today about how there's this theory of a potential electrical failure that could have happened. There are some error messages that have come in. Of course, it's for the investigators to find out what the meaning of those error messages is, what is corroborated in the flight data recorder, because there are multiple parameters, hundreds of parameters that they have to contend with, and that's why these reports finally take so long. But the point is that when we are seized with all of these theories, jumping the gun, blaming the pilots, just imagine what's happening to the 90-year-old father of this person who's, already suffered the shock of his son being lost, and now his son being defamed in this manner that he sort of deliberately drove the aircraft into the ground. Captain Mittal.
Absolutely. My point is here, why were the names and the photographs of the pilots released in the media in the first place? If you had, this year has been a very unfortunate year. Like, we've had many airplane crashes. The first one started when in the American Airlines, which had a mid-air collision with the helicopter pilot. And none of the names of the pilots were released in that one. The Delta airline crash in Canada, which landed upside down, even in those, the names of the pilots were never released. But in this case, and on media everywhere, it's been showing their faces, it's been showing their family, and it started from all that. And now when it all gets out, the cat's out of the bag. Now, of course, the speculations will be there. And yes, we shouldn't be jumping the gun on these things because, again, we're quoting Wall Street Journal. And how is Wall Street Journal getting this information from and where they're getting it from?
Yeah.
It's not been officially released. All the voice, why isn't the entire conversations released in the media? I understand in the cockpits, there are a lot of time personal conversations and all that. You can omit those conversations, but related to the safety of the flight or the normal operations, none of them have been released at all yet. And that's what is starting these speculations here.
All right, and let me bring in Bernard Revel on that. Bernard Revel, if you have Wall Street Journal pushing a certain narrative, if you have NTSB members who are part of the investigation here in India and who are peddling a certain narrative there to their audience in the United States, it's no surprise there because in the past, as I mentioned, the 737 MAX incident, we saw the NTSB safeguarding Boeing's interest. Or maybe there were genuine mistakes that they made. But in this case, their conduct cannot be, said to be above board either because they also are an interested party at the end of the day. So why jump to these conclusions?
Well, I think the Wall Street Journal and other media are just running a story. The problem is we're back to where we started from in terms of everyone is speculating. The only information that we should be focusing on are the facts that come out from the AAIB in their report. So we've had the interim report, the 30-day report. The full report, unfortunately, will be 12 months away. So, of course, everyone wants to know information in between that. The Wall Street Journal quotes sources close to the investigation. So there are obviously leaks coming from the investigation. So the AAIB needs to close down those leaks because that is fueling the speculation that goes on. And we don't know, we know the field switches were put from run to cut off. We don't know why and we don't know how that happened. And until we do, that we should only be focusing on the facts that have been released. But I think the AAIB does need to clamp down on the leaks that are obviously happening. And it's wider leaks because it's the Indian authorities, but obviously they're working in close cooperation with other authorities as well, whether it's the NTSB from the US or Boeing or GE or whoever. So I think that's part of the challenge. People are looking for information, people are looking for speculation, and they're getting the speculation, but it's not based on the facts.
All right, and Dr. Raghunathan, we've seen this, in the past. It's an altogether familiar script. There are over 1,200 such Dreamliners that are flying around that have been manufactured over the past 12 years or so. Each of those aircraft now cost thousands of crores. So just look at the kind of figures we're talking about. We're talking about tens of thousands of lakhs of crores of rupees. I don't even know how to, enumerate that in dollars. That's at stake. That's flying around for Boeing. So if there are technical glitches, I'm sure Boeing would actually want to, at whatever level, try to cover it up. Is that a surmise that one can draw from what appear to be planted reports?
Good evening, Madhav, and good evening to my fellow panelists, all of whom I have noticed are experts. So I speak purely as a common man and a layman, and my views should be considered as such in the interest of transparency. First of all, I am absolutely appalled, like you and everyone else is, at the unfolding tragedy of what is happening, of one of our finest pilots, the names and the family being maligned as such. This morning, a UK media report clearly alleging that the pilot committed suicide and brought down the plane because he was depressed after his mother passed away. This kind of insinuation should not be let off. And I congratulate the petitioner, Mr. Praveen, for going ahead and approaching the courts, because this is not just maligning the reputation of the deceased pilot who is no longer there to defend himself. It is maligning the family. It is maligning the aircraft carrier. It is maligning Indians per se. Now I come to the other two substantive points, one of which you've already made. Madhav, I'm sorry to say, but even this AAIB investigative team, even DGCA, are appointed by the government of India that clearly has a stake when it comes to having economic and financial partnership or collaborations with countries that manufacture these planes. There is, if ever there was one, a conflict of interest. When you mention hundreds of billions of dollars being, I'm not talking about auction or trading. I'm talking of, the planes being purchased by a country. Obviously, there is a trade deal happening. Now, under those circumstances, Boeing and the aircraft manufacturers are going to pussyfoot around the fact that it might be the error of brought about by a deficiency in the plane, because that would mean that that trade is actually struck off. Under such circumstances, under no way should the investigation be conducted by any person or any organization that is linked directly with either of the governments, leave alone Boeing, leave alone plane manufacturer. I think the time has come for, like we have the CAG, the audit that is commissioned by the Constitution to be completely independent, to have an organization that is completely independent. Right now, as you say, I cannot trust the findings of the AIB. Because if it says, first of all, it had no business to just leak out part of the theory, and also the fact that Indians got to know about this preliminary report almost 2 days before the foreigners did. This kind of selective leakage is unacceptable, and I think the time has come away and beyond to what Mr. Praveen is doing for the family to also sue for defamation against all this scurrilous yellow tabloid media of foreign countries.
All right, I wanted to come in on this, because Alistair Rosenshine, the point is this. There's one line of the CVR that's been cherry-picked. It's, maybe a 30 to 40-second flight that has taken place. We know what a short CVR it would be. Even the CVR is not reproduced in its entirety. There are multiple theories, but the report seems to hang on to one particular theory, or at least lean towards a particular theory. Why is it that other aspects of what could have possibly gone wrong have not been mentioned in great detail? Can you explain that to us, Alistair Rosenshine, in your understanding?
Well, yes. Having read the AAIB report, I am surprised that they've only released snippets of information. The flight was very short, and there was no reason why they didn't release the full transcript of the cockpit voice recorder. They chose to focus on this single point, and that is suggesting that the investigators, the Indian investigators, have focused on the fact that the fuel had shut off to both engines. And that appears to be the reason for the accident. Whether or not it was the pilots who did it, and particularly if we're talking about a suicide event, you can't glean that from this very, very brief report at the moment. But, one really has to be patient to wait for the result. And it is, I have to agree with the Indian Pilots Association that it is quite wrong to jump to the conclusion that this was a suicide. But you also, on the other hand, can't dismiss it totally. It is definitely a possibility. It is one of many possibilities that have resulted in this accident. And we know from previous accidents that there are multiple causes to an accident. And there's no reason to suspect that this accident is any different from previous accidents.
Let me draw your attention back to what has happened, for instance, in 2019. And I want to bring in Air Marshal Kapoor on this. Air Marshal Kapoor, we've seen how in 2019, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, during a flight operated by the All Nippon Airways or ANA in Japan, had a similar software-induced fuel switch cutoff without any pilot intervention. It's happened in the past on the very same aircraft. The very same aircraft has been grounded in 2013 because of battery-related issues. So why, when there is a history of mechanical failure, these are the aspects that have to be probed deeply on the same pattern. We are looking at electrical failures that are being reported today. We brought out the report of the logs. Why is that not being probed in greater detail?
See, Madhav, that incident you're mentioning is not of 2018, it is of January 2019. All Nippon Airways lands.
Yes, January 2019, you're right.
January 2019. And fortunately for everybody, both the engines got cut off when the thrust reversals were operated by the pilot on land. And fortunately, the aircraft was on ground. It was stored back. The circular which came in 2018 by FAA, the agencies are now saying it is advisory in nature. There is nothing advisory in aviation. Everything has to be viewed with the deep lenses of flight safety. Because not only are you carrying the aircraft, but it is the life of the passengers which is entrusted on the airline that they have to be extra vigilant and safe. Now, coming specifically to this, there are two things you must understand. The machines are becoming more and more software driven. The 787 is totally an electrically a dominated kind of a platform rather than in conventional. So over the years, what is happening is with infusion of technology, the pilots are becoming more and more systems operators, and it is the software and the computers which are briefing the pilot as what to do. It's like driving a normal car with gears, and now you have cars with head-up displays, sensors, cameras. It improves the situational awareness, but it somehow, makes you dependent on technology, where the human brain stops to, take action by the cognitive skills that have been inculcated in a pilot. In this case, in my appreciation, the valves have got cut off due to a FedEx or a software malfunction.
Absolutely, that's one.
Now the pilots have realized that the fuel has got cut off, and these
Bernard Lavelle, why is that not a believable theory? Because, even if you go by what has been stated by the lone survivor, there was a flickering of lights inside the cabin. And that, many say, is a dead giveaway of electrical malfunction inside the aircraft.
Well, it's possible. And as one of your other guests said, there are usually multiple reasons for failure on an aircraft. And because the narrative at the moment, the story is focusing on the pilots, what we don't want is for other possible causes to be missed. So yes, it is possible. It's one of a number of theories that I'm sure the AAIB are looking at and quite rightly should look at. But their full report doesn't come out for 12 months, and people are wanting answers now. And what I'm worried about is we'll get potentially a quick report rather than a right report, and that's not going to help anybody.
Right. And Captain Mittal, the point is that even if they have accessed, this particular report, where in the report does it say one pilot was, calm, one pilot was agitated and suddenly started reacting? The kind of adjectives, it seems more like fiction writing than fact writing that the Wall Street Journal is engaged in this particular report. Captain Mittal.
Yes, that does cast a lot of doubt, because how do they know that one pilot was calm and the other one was not? There's a lot of, if there is if there's electrical failures, there's no way one pilot can be calm. His voice might sound calm, but there is a lot of things going on in the cockpit, because these cockpits, they start sounding so many bells and whistles and confusion and all that. And it takes time for a human being to kind of, just to get a gist of what's going on, to kind of realize what's going on. So I don't understand how they can come up with one was calm and one was not calm. That does kind of, point towards finger pointing, like they are trying to make a story here and trying to jump the gun here without actually getting into all the facts. So again, to stop all these speculations, I guess what the best thing is, okay, if people are getting snippets of the conversation, why can't they just get all the conversations in the media to everybody, and this will stop all the speculation right then and there.
Put to rest all the speculation. Captain, Dr. Nathan, I want you to bring in on this.
The recorder should say that when did the engine stop? Did the engine stop after the fuel cutoff or before the fuel cutoff?
That's the point. That's the point. In fact, if they just bring out that aspect from the digital flight data recorder, the whole thing will be set. All the speculation will be set to rest. We're not ruling out any probability, Dr. Ranganathan, but perhaps it's incumbent on the investigators to answer that question. Did the switches move, or the valve move, or the cutoff happen after the engine shut down or before it?
Madhav, I'm afraid our investigative agencies or AIB have completely blundered out here. I agree with Mr. Alistair, but very briefly, 2 points. I don't mean to be patronizing, but there are 3 pilots on the panel, and I speak as a layman. India conducts one of the most stringent medical tests on our pilots, civilian and military. In fact, AAIB should have mentioned that 2 medical tests were passed by both pilots in a span of 14 months. They are called, I think, class 1 medical tests. Anurag Ji would corroborate on that. Number 1. Number 2. It is a fact, and I completely agree with Alistair out here, that instead of giving snippets, because the duration of the flight was only 30 or 40 seconds, the entire record should have been made public. I don't mind them making things public, but do not pick and choose what you are going to make public. That has caused this entire speculation. So they have blundered along the way. The only way they must correct the blunder is to immediately release every conversation on the entire duration of the flight.
All right. We'll have to leave it there. In fact, Dr. Ranganathan, I'd like to thank all our panelists for joining us this evening. Dr.